Welcome to Painted Business Stories, where iconic companies are brought to life through history, ambition, rivalry, and art. Today, we follow the story of Lamborghini, a brand not born on the racetrack, but in farms, workshops, tractors, and post-war Italy. To begin, we travel once again to northern Italy, to the region of Emilia-Romagna. More specifically, we arrive in the quiet town of Rinazzo di Cento, where Antonio and Evelina Lamborghini worked as grape farmers. Their son, Ferruccio Lamborghini, was born there in 1916, during the chaos of the First World War. Ferruccio was born under the zodiac sign Taurus, the bull. That detail may sound small, but it would later become one of the most recognizable symbols in the entire luxury car industry. Unlike his parents, Ferruccio was not especially drawn to the life of a farmer. He grew up surrounded by vineyards, rural labor, and agricultural tradition, but his real fascination was always with machinery. Engines, tools, mechanical parts, and anything that could be taken apart and put back together captured his attention. While many young men in poor Italian farming families were expected to follow the same path as their parents, Ferruccio wanted something different. In early 20th century Italy, that was not an easy decision. For someone from a modest background, there were essentially two choices: remain in traditional rural work or take a risk and try to enter the growing industrial world. Ferruccio chose the second option without much hesitation. Machines were his obsession, and by the mid-1930s he had gained enough confidence in his mechanical ability to open a small workshop of his own. But history had other plans. In 1940, Italy entered the Second World War, and Ferruccio was drafted into the Royal Italian Air Force. He was sent to the island of Rhodes, then under Italian control, where he worked as a mechanic. The posting proved important. On Rhodes, he was exposed to military vehicles, aircraft equipment, damaged engines, spare parts, and all kinds of machinery that needed to be repaired under difficult conditions. This gave Ferruccio a kind of practical education that no ordinary workshop could have offered. He learned how to salvage broken machines, reuse old parts, improvise solutions, and keep vehicles running even when proper supplies were limited. Then, in 1943, Italy surrendered to the Allies. The situation on Rhodes changed dramatically. German forces took control of the garrison, pushing aside their former Italian allies. Ferruccio could have left, but instead he remained on the island as a civilian. With permission from the Germans, he continued operating a workshop and repairing vehicles. His skill was too useful to ignore. When the war finally ended in 1945, Allied forces arrived and took the people at the garrison prisoner. Ferruccio was among them, but once again his mechanical ability worked in his favor. The Allies quickly realized that he could repair their vehicles, and rather than simply holding him as an ordinary prisoner, they put him to work. For about a year, he continued fixing military machinery before finally being sent home to Italy in 1946. When Ferruccio returned, Italy was a wounded country. The war had devastated its economy, its infrastructure, and its agricultural production. But Ferruccio saw opportunity where others saw wreckage. He opened another workshop, but soon his mind turned to a bigger idea. He had spent years working with military equipment from both Axis and Allied forces. He understood engines, he understood salvage, and he understood how to turn leftover machinery into something useful. Post-war Italy desperately needed to rebuild its farms, increase food production, and modernize agriculture. Tractors were in demand, but they were expensive and not always accessible to ordinary farmers. Ferruccio realized that Italy was sitting on a mountain of surplus military equipment. Engines, parts, and old vehicles from the war could be repurposed. If he could transform that leftover machinery into affordable tractors, he could serve a real need and build a business at the same time. Near the end of 1947, Ferruccio founded his first company. He started small, with only a handful of mechanics and very little capital. His main supplier was ARAR, the government organization responsible for selling surplus military stock left over from the war. His breakthrough came when he took old British Morris engines and modified them to run on cheaper diesel rather than expensive petrol. The result was a practical, affordable tractor that Italian farmers could actually buy. This became the foundation of his first major product, the Carioca tractor, which was unveiled in February 1948. The response was immediate. Italian farmers needed machines like this, and Ferruccio had arrived at exactly the right moment. The Carioca was rugged, useful, and affordable. Demand grew quickly, and Ferruccio followed up by creating Lamborghini Trattori. He hired more workers, purchased factory space in Cento, and took out a major loan backed by his family's farm in order to buy hundreds of surplus engines from ARAR. Ferruccio was still a man who loved cars, and in 1948 he decided to enter the famous Mille Miglia endurance race. He drove a modified Fiat Topolino, but his racing career ended almost as quickly as it began. He crashed into the side of a restaurant and decided that competitive racing was not for him. That incident would matter later. Ferruccio loved fast cars, but he did not love racing in the same way Enzo Ferrari did. His vision of the perfect car would not be a fragile track machine. It would be fast, elegant, refined, and usable on the road. Meanwhile, the tractor business continued to expand. By 1950, Lamborghini Trattori employed around 30 people and was producing hundreds of tractors per year. Demand kept rising, and in 1951, Ferruccio acquired land for a larger factory. That same year, Lamborghini introduced the L33 tractor, which benefited from Italian government incentives designed to encourage farmers to buy domestic-produced machinery. Ferruccio's business matured quickly. After arranging to use diesel engines from Motorenwerke Mannheim, Lamborghini was able to produce tractors more independently. By the mid-1950s, the company had become a serious industrial operation. Its new factory produced its first tractor in 1956, and Ferruccio continued refining his designs around different horsepower categories to suit different agricultural needs. He was not content to stop there. Ferruccio traveled to the United States to study heating and air conditioning technology, later expanding into oil burners and climate systems. By the early 1960s, Lamborghini's tractor factory had hundreds of employees and was producing dozens of tractors every day. The company also experimented with air-cooled engines and even helicopter concepts, though the Italian government never approved those aviation ambitions. By this point, Ferruccio Lamborghini was no longer simply a mechanic or a farmer's son. He was a wealthy industrialist, and like many wealthy industrialists, he began spending money on expensive cars. His garage became impressive. He owned Alfa Romeos, Maseratis, a Jaguar E-Type, a Mercedes-Benz, and several Ferraris. Ferruccio admired Ferrari cars. He respected their speed and prestige, but he was also a mechanic, and mechanics tend to notice problems that ordinary owners ignore. Ferruccio found Ferraris noisy, uncomfortable, and a little too rough around the edges. To him, they were excellent performance machines, but not perfect grand touring cars. The interiors felt too basic. The ride was not refined enough. And worst of all, his Ferraris seemed to suffer repeated clutch problems. After dealing with the issue one too many times, Ferruccio decided to investigate it himself. According to the famous version of the story, he discovered that the clutch used in his Ferrari was not so different from components used in his tractors. Annoyed by the constant repairs, he decided to take the matter directly to the man at the top. So Ferruccio Lamborghini went to Modena and confronted Enzo Ferrari. The meeting did not go well. Ferruccio explained his complaint and suggested that Ferrari could improve the clutch. Enzo, proud and famously dismissive, did not appreciate advice from a tractor manufacturer. And depending on which version of the story you believe, Ferrari essentially told Lamborghini that he knew how to drive tractors, not sports cars. That insult struck exactly the wrong man. Ferruccio was wealthy, technically skilled, deeply proud, and not the sort of person who enjoyed being humiliated. What might have been a minor customer complaint turned into a personal challenge. If Ferrari would not listen to him, then Lamborghini would build his own car. And in 1963, that is exactly what he did. Ferruccio founded Automotive Lamborghini and built a new factory near Sant'Agata Bolognese, not far from Ferrari's territory. The goal was not to build race cars. Ferruccio had no interest in copying Ferrari completely. His dream was to build the perfect grand touring car. Powerful, beautiful, technically advanced, and comfortable enough to drive on the road without feeling like a stripped-down race machine. For the company emblem, he chose a bull. The symbol reflected his zodiac sign, Taurus, but also his fascination with bullfighting. It was aggressive, proud, and instantly memorable. It also positioned Lamborghini perfectly against Ferrari's prancing horse. The first production Lamborghini, the 350 GT, appeared in 1964. It was developed with help from talented young engineers, including Paolo Stanzani and others who would later become central figures in the company's early success. The car featured impressive technology for its time, a V12 engine, a 5-speed gearbox, 4-wheel disc brakes, and independent suspension. But creating a new luxury sports car company from nothing was not easy. The prototype shown at the 1963 Turin Auto Show was rushed and had serious packaging problems. Rather than allow that flaw to ruin the debut, the team simply kept the hood closed. The point of the show, after all, was to impress people with the look and promise of the car. And impress them it did. Once refined into the production 350 GT, Lamborghini's first car proved that Ferruccio was serious. This was not a vanity project from a rich tractor manufacturer. It was a genuine grand tourer with engineering credibility. Then came the 400 GT, and then in 1966 came the car that changed everything, the Lamborghini Miura. The Miura was revolutionary. Its rear mid-engine layout placed the engine behind the driver, but ahead of the rear axle, creating a design philosophy that would become standard for many of the world's most serious performance cars. It was low, dramatic, beautiful, and unlike almost anything else on the road. Interestingly, the Miura was not originally Ferruccio's idea. A group of ambitious Lamborghini engineers developed the concept partly in secret because they knew Ferruccio was cautious about anything that looked too much like a race car. His own crash in the Mille Miglia had left him with little desire to build racing machines. But when Ferruccio saw the Miura, he understood its potential. He allowed the project to continue, though he maintained his policy that Lamborghini would not become a racing company. The Miura made Lamborghini famous around the world. It was glamorous, exotic, and technically daring. It helped define the idea of the modern supercar. The late 1960s and early 1970s brought more important models. The Espada became one of Lamborghini's most recognizable grand tourers. The Islero, Jarama, Urraco, and eventually the Countach continued to push the brand's design language into stranger, sharper, more futuristic territory. The Countach in particular became an icon. With its wedge-shaped body, scissor doors, and outrageous proportions, it looked less like a normal car and more like something that had escaped from a science fiction film. If the Miura helped invent the supercar, the Countach helped turn it into a poster on every teenager's bedroom wall. But while Lamborghini's cars were becoming legends, the business behind them was becoming fragile. The 1970s were brutal for the automotive industry. The collapse of the Bretton Woods system created monetary instability. The global stock market suffered a major crash. Then the 1973 oil crisis struck, sending fuel prices sharply upward and making large, thirsty performance cars much harder to sell. For a company like Lamborghini, this was a serious problem. Its cars were expensive, exotic, and powered by large engines. They were objects of desire, but not exactly practical purchases during an energy crisis. At the same time, Ferruccio's tractor business also faced disaster. Lamborghini Trattori had expected to supply thousands of tractors to Bolivia, but the deal collapsed after political upheaval in the country. Suddenly, Ferruccio was left with unsold inventory and financial pressure across multiple companies. He tried to keep everything together. He found buyers where he could, reorganized parts of his business, and looked for ways to survive. But the pressure was too great. To avoid collapse, he began selling stakes in his companies. In 1973, Ferruccio sold Lamborghini Trattori to another Italian tractor manufacturer. Then, in 1974, he sold his remaining stake in Automotive Lamborghini. The man who had created the company to challenge Ferrari was now out of the car business. For Ferruccio, the dream had become exhausting. Italy was also experiencing labor unrest, strikes, and union pressure, which made running large industrial companies even more difficult. Rather than continue fighting, he stepped away from the empire he had built. Unfortunately, Lamborghini's problems did not end with his departure. The company passed into the hands of outside investors who tried to revive it but struggled to make it profitable. Eventually, Automotive Lamborghini entered liquidation. In 1980, the company was purchased by the Mimran brothers, French entrepreneurs with major business interests in Africa. They invested heavily, renovated facilities, hired engineers, and attempted to bring Lamborghini back to life. The Mimran era gave Lamborghini some stability and helped produce new momentum, but the company remained expensive to run. In 1987, they sold Lamborghini to Chrysler. Chrysler saw Lamborghini as a prestigious European brand that could help expand its image, especially in the United States. Under Chrysler, Lamborghini continued developing cars, but profitability remained difficult. Less than a decade later, Chrysler sold the company to an Indonesian investment group. That ownership period brought some improvement. Lamborghini began to stabilize and even returned a modest profit in the mid-1990s. But once again, global events intervened. The Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s placed enormous pressure on the investors behind the company, and so Lamborghini was sold again. This time, the buyer was Volkswagen Group. Under the leadership of Ferdinand Piëch, Volkswagen acquired Lamborghini through Audi, alongside other high-profile luxury acquisitions such as Bentley and Bugatti. This was a turning point. Volkswagen brought something Lamborghini had often lacked: deep pockets, industrial discipline, engineering resources, and long-term stability. Under Audi's management, Lamborghini became more structured, more reliable, and more capable of competing in the modern luxury performance market. The company did not lose its wild personality, but it gained the kind of manufacturing and corporate support that allowed it to survive. In the 21st century, Lamborghini aggressively expanded its brand while continuing to invest in materials, design, and performance technology. Carbon fiber development, all-wheel drive systems, advanced aerodynamics, and limited edition halo cars helped keep the brand desirable. The Gallardo became one of the company's greatest commercial successes. Over its 10-year production run, it sold more than 14,000 units, making it one of the most popular Lamborghinis ever built. It proved that Lamborghini could produce an exotic car in meaningful numbers without destroying the mystique of the brand. The Huracan later succeeded the Gallardo, continuing Lamborghini's entry-level supercar line. The Aventador carried the VAT12 tradition into the modern era. And the Urus, Lamborghini's high-performance SUV, expanded the brand into a much wider luxury market. That last move would probably have seemed strange to Ferruccio, but in some ways it fits the Lamborghini story perfectly. After all, this was a company founded by a tractor manufacturer. Lamborghini was never just about delicate racing machines. It was always about power, drama, engineering, and pride. Ferruccio Lamborghini died in 1993, before seeing the Volkswagen era and the company's modern resurgence. But if he could look at Lamborghini today, he would likely recognize the spirit behind it. The company he created out of frustration, ambition, and wounded pride still stands as Ferrari's great rival. Its cars remain loud, theatrical, aggressive, and unmistakable. The bull still charges, the rivalry still sells, and the story still feels almost too perfect to be true. A farmer's son became a mechanic. The mechanic became a tractor magnate. The tractor magnate bought a Ferrari. The Ferrari annoyed him. Enzo Ferrari insulted him. And instead of simply accepting it, Ferruccio Lamborghini built one of the most iconic car companies in history. In the end, Lamborghini was not born from racing heritage in the same way Ferrari was. It was born from engineering confidence, industrial success, and one man's refusal to be dismissed. And that may be why the brand still feels so different. Ferrari represents tradition, racing blood, and the mythology of motorsport. Lamborghini represents rebellion, excess, and the joy of proving someone wrong. It is the mechanical equivalent of looking your critic in the eye and saying, "Fine, I'll build it myself." And that is the story of Lamborghini, a company born from machinery, ambition, pride, and one man's refusal to be dismissed. Thanks for watching Painted Business Stories. Subscribe for more painted stories of the companies, founders, and rivalries that shaped the world.